Dankjewel, Annabel. Goedemorgen, dames en heren. I am extremely pleased to be here with you and bring a message of very warm solidarity from the global call to action against poverty, which 11-11-11 is a critical part of. And I want to say to you that I had a little bit of a doubt coming to this meeting about how many people would turn up. And I was thinking about a moment when, as a 22-year-old, I fled into exile to the United Kingdom, and I was asked to go and speak to the British Trade Union Congress about the tragedy of the apartheid system in South Africa. And I went off there thinking that I was addressing the whole British Trade Union Congress, but actually it was what they called a fringe meeting, which was a side meeting, and I was 22 years old at the time. Coming from South Africa, if you said fringe, it referred more to a hairstyle rather than a kind of meeting. So I pitched up at the meeting, and at 8 p.m. when the meeting was to start, there was nobody. And at 8:05, there was one person. And at about 8:20, I said, well, it's just both of us. Why don't we just go have a coffee and I can tell you what's happening in South Africa? And the person said, no, I made an effort to come here. Please give your speech. So 20 minutes later, the person stood up and beautifully clapped and said, not a bad speech. I said, okay, then bye-bye, I'm leaving. He said, no, you can't go. I'm the other speaker. You have to stay and listen to me. So let me really ask you, for those of you who've organized an event of this nature, certainly on an early Saturday morning, early in the new year, will know how much of effort it takes to bring together this rich collection of people. So I want to just ask you, before I get into my substance, to put your hands together to thank the staff, the board, the volunteers of 11-11-11 for bringing us together on this wonderful Saturday morning. My dear brothers and sisters, as we gather here, we live in a unique historical moment. It is a moment that can be described as a perfect storm. What do we mean by this? Over the last couple of years, we have seen a coming together, a convergence of a range of crises that have become crystal clear that if we do not act with urgency, the future of our children and grandchildren in rich and poor countries is now deeply under threat. First, we had a huge fuss about the spike in fuel prices. That was followed by significant increases in food prices. And by the way, even though fuel prices came down subsequently, food prices did not come down proportionally in rich and poor countries. And then we live with the reality that we have a poverty crisis that every single day still takes 50,000 lives, and all those lives, or a majority of those lives, are preventable with the right kinds of actions by political leaders and others. The financial crisis, of course, suddenly sent a message that we were in a crisis. And it's interesting to actually understand why did we ignore the poverty crisis, the climate crisis, the fact that, in fact, when you look at it from the part of the world I come from, we are living with a daily silent tsunami or a passive genocide. In the Africa alone, as we sit here today, 6,000 people die from HIV/AIDS every day, 7,000 people die from malaria every day, 1,500 people plus or minus die from tuberculosis every day. This is certainly not the best that humanity can be, and our purpose in coming here together and in the work that we are doing in Belgium and around the world is to say that as a human family, we can deliver development, we can address the range of challenges that humanity faces, and we can all do much, much better than we are doing at the moment. I want to, because when you give a long speech, sometimes people forget most of what you say, so I want you to just remember one thing that I'm going to say now. picking up from what Bogdan said in his intro. We must ask this question. If our governments were able to, virtually overnight, not find millions, not find billions, but find trillions of dollars to bail out the banks, the bankers, and the bonuses, surely it's a legitimate moment right now for this conference to make a strong call to say to our leaders, surely, as an act of compassion, when the whole world is watching Haiti, that we should have a clear statement that the people of Haiti should be given a fresh chance and a similar kind of urgency and political will should be shown, and the debt of Haiti should be written off immediately, and the people of Haiti be given a fair chance to start over afresh to rebuild their country after centuries of exploitation and injustice. But the moment we live in also tells us it cannot be business as usual. Albert Einstein once said, if you're trying to address a big, massive problem, then you cannot use the same thinking, the same institutions, the same frameworks, the same logics that got you in the problem in the first place. And I want to suggest that our response to the crisis, which sadly for too many of our governments has been seen only as a financial crisis, but not the crisis in its entirety, we cannot use the same thinking that got us in the crisis in the first place. And if we evaluate the stimulus packages, as they've been called, in some ways you can see it as one big, massive band-aid to try to cover the problem. But my dear brothers and sisters, rest assured that we have not solved the problem, and we will not solve the problem unless we are willing to accept that some tough decisions need to be made, and particularly decisions need to be made about not continuing as business as usual. We have to change the way that we act. And what does that mean? There is a need for a deep change in policies. Even if you want to reach the Millennium Development Goals, and Jan, who was one of the architects of it, will be one of the first to say that the Millennium Development Goals is not a revolutionary document. In fact, quite often in the UN and outside, we used to say the MDG stands for not Millennium Development Goals, but Minimalist Development Goals. You know, that's the minimum that we should be aiming for, and sadly, with 5 years to go, we are not even, significantly close to those targets. But when we look at the NGO community's own role in thinking about not being businesses, sorry, I was wondering what you were looking at. When we look at the NGO community's own role, we also have to step back and ask of ourselves, are we doing the best that we can? Are we as accountable as we can be? And so on. And I want to suggest that when we say it can't be business as usual, we also now need to be saying it cannot be activism as usual. What do I mean by that? Today, when we look at the role of the Belgian NGOs who are part of 1111 and around the world, you'll find that we are playing a role at 3 levels. We are delivering direct services at the micro level. We are trying to change policies at the national and global level. And at a macro level, we are also, where we have governance problems, we are trying to actually change the very governance institutions that actually set the framework on how policy is made. So a good example, if we look at the World Bank and IMF, 2 institutions that are urgently in need of fundamental change, we can try to influence the policies of those institutions, and we all do, but you can only get so far because, for example, when we used to meet with the former president of the World Bank, Jim Wolfenson, we would often get to a point where you would say, you know what, I agree with you folks, yes, the World Bank should be very transparent. If it signs, for example, a contract with any government, it should put it up on the website. The citizens of that country should know exactly what that contract was and so on in terms of a disclosure policy. However, the board of the World Bank will not necessarily allow me to do that policy. And then you ask the question, who is the board of the World Bank? The board of the World Bank is still governed by a $1 one vote system. It still has, the president still has to be a US citizen, even though Barack Obama now is saying he might change that. And of course, any of you are getting a surge of European pride thinking, oh, we Europeans are not as bad as Americans. On this question, just remember that the IMF managing director has always been a European.